So here's an example of how to solve a system of equations using this method called Gaussian elimination. Okay? This is instead of having to do the techniques that we learned in section 9.2. Okay? First of all, to solve this using Gaussian elimination, we just want to put our matrix in what's called row echelon form. That's all we really need to do. Okay? So my matrix, I'm gonna write those in black. Okay? So my augmented matrix is a 2, a -8, a 54, augmented with a -4. Okay? That's for the first equation. For the second equation, the coefficients are 1, -2, 14, -1 is the constant. The third equation has a 1, a -3, a 19, and a -3. Okay? Now to double check to make sure I didn't do anything wrong, a lot of times I like to look down the first column. 2, 1, 1. Is that what I have down the first column? 2, 1, 1. Yes. Okay. Second column, -8, -2, -3. I like that. Third column, 54, 14, 19. I like that. And for just the numbers, it's augmented with a -4, a -1, and a -3. Okay, you can't get these right if you mess up right off the bat and write the incorrect augmented matrix. For some reason, I know that. Okay? Now, the idea that we want for a matrix that's written in reduced row echelon form is we want this number right up here to be a 1. That's our goal. So basically, to accomplish that, I am going to just interchange either row 1 with either row 2 or row 3. I've decided I'm going to interchange row 1 with, let me go, row 2. That's all we got to do. I'm interchanging row 1 with row 2. So my new row 1 is 1, -2, 14, augmented with -1. Okay? And now my row 2 is what was row 1, the 2, -8, 54, -4. And my row 3 hasn't changed. 1, -3, 19, -3. Okay? All right, now that's how I chose how to do that, but that wasn't the only thing you could have done. Okay? This isn't just one way to do this. And that's all. Another thing I could have done to get a 1 right here, like I was wanting to do, is I could have done 1/2 row 1. That would have given me a 1, -4, 27, -2. That's not what I chose to do, but that's another thing you could have done to get the leading 1 in the first row. Okay? Now, our next goal is going to be to try to get a 0 here and a 0 here. Okay? That's what we want it to look like. So, to accomplish that, okay, I'm going to do, I need to get negative coefficient, or sorry, opposite coefficients. I'm going to take negative, okay, I don't want to do that in black. I want to do that in orange or some other color. I'm going to take -2, okay, see why? I'm going to do a -2 times row 1. I'm going to add that to row 2, and that's going to get me a new row 2. Okay? All right, that's the plan because I want opposite coefficients here and here is the whole reason I'm doing that. All right, so I'm doing -2 times row 1 added to row 2 to get me a new row 2, and you'll see why here in just a minute. First of all, let's write out what is -2 times row 1. Multiplying -2 times row 1, I've got a 1. Sorry, not a 1. Hello, do -2 times row 1. Okay, so -2 times row 1 would give us a -2, a +4, a -28 augmented with +2. Copy over row 2 just as it is. 2, -8, 54, and -4. Now, add those together, and you'll get a 0. That's the whole reason we're doing that. A 0 there, and then add the rest of these together. 4 and a -8 is -4. -28 and 54. What is 54 minus 28? 26. Okay? And then 2 minus 4 is a -2. All right, all we have is now a new row 2. Our row 1 remains what it was here. 1, -2, 14 augmented with a -1. Now, we got a new row 2. Our new row 2 is 0, -4, 26, -2. Row 3 hasn't changed. It is still 1, -3, not -19, 19 and -3. Okay? So like we said a minute ago, the next thing, and see, I can like totally scroll once I get my new matrix. I don't need to look at the rest of that anymore. Okay? What I want to do now is get a 0 right here. Okay? So I'm going to be able to accomplish that if I take a -1 times row 1, add it to row 3 to get a new row 3, and that row 3 is now going to have a 0 where I want it to be. Okay? So let's write that out. Okay? -1 times row 1 just changes all the signs. -1 times row 1 is -1, 2, -14 augmented with a +1. Okay? -1 times row 1. Row 3, I'm just going to copy it down just like it is. Row 3 right now has a 1, a -3, a 19, and a -3. Now, I'm going to add those together. To get -1 plus 1 is 0. Ding, 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 ding. That's the reason I wanted to do that. 2 minus 3 is a -1. -14 and 19 combined to give me 5. And 1 minus 3 is a -2. Okay? So now I have a new row 3, and that's all I have is a new row 3. Row 1 doesn't change. It's still a +1, -2, 14, and -1. Row 2 doesn't change. It's still a 0, -4, 26, -2. Now I got my new row 3, and it is a 0, -1, 5, -2. Okay? Now, the next thing we might want to do is we next need to get, here's what we want. We want a +1 to be right here somehow. Okay? That's our goal. I think probably the easiest thing to do to get the 1 right here, which is our goal, let me move it out of the way. Woo! Look how I slid him right over there. Is I think really what I want to do is I want to swap these 2 rows because this already has a 1. Well, it's a -1. We're pretty close. Okay? So the only thing I'm going to do now is I'm just going to interchange rows 2 and 3. So interchange row 2 with row 3. That gives me row 1's the same. 1, -2, 14, -1. Now, my new row 2 is the 0, -1, 5, -2. And my new row 3 is what was row 2, the 0, -4, 26, -2. Careful on copying over all this negatives and positives and all that stuff. Okay? Now, one last step to get this positive 1 that I really want, and that is to do a multiple of row 2. All I've got to do is I've got to take, a negative 1 times row 2, and that's going to give me a new row 2. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm multiplying here everything by a negative 1. Okay, that's it. So that's the only thing that's changed. And in all honesty, you really don't have to recopy this each time. I would just cheat and I would be like plus, minus, plus. Okay, well, we're going to write it out. We're going to write it out for now. So I've got a 1 still, a negative 2, 14, augmented with the negative 1. And then we've got now 0, positive 1, negative 5, and positive 2, once I took the negative 1 times row 2 to get my new row 2. And my row 3 doesn't change. It's still 0, negative 4, 26, and negative 2. Okay? Next thing. Next goal, okay, is to get a 0 right here. I really want a 0 right there. So, to get that to happen, I'm going to take a positive 4 and multiply that by row 2, so that that's 4, okay, added to row 3 to get a new row 3 that will have the zeros there. Let me move all this stuff, all the goals out of my way, okay? That's why I'm doing all this. Now, like I said, it's better, and what we did above is we wrote this vertically, the 4 times row 2, added to row 3 to yield a new row 3. That's my plan. That's what I have outlined right here anyway, okay? So 4 multiplied by row 2. I'm taking a 4 multiplied by everything in row 2. 4 times 0 is still 0. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. And 4 times 2 is 8. Row 3, okay? Row 3 was just a 0, negative 4, 26, and a negative 2. I'm going to add this stuff together, okay? I want to add it together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 4 plus a negative 4 is 0. Negative 20 and 26 is 6. And 8 minus 2 is 6. Okay? Now I've got my new row 3. Rows 1 and 2 are going to remain the same. Okay, row 2 is still 0, 1, negative 5, 2. And now my new row 3 is 0, 0, 6, 6. Okay? Now, my next goal, y'all, is to get another leading 1 right there. Okay? That's what I want, because along that main diagonal, remember, along that main diagonal here, I want all 1s. Okay? Let me clean this up. I kind of made a mess. Now, we can easily get that leading 1. We can turn that 6 into a 1 if we just take 1/6 times row 3 to get a new row 3. Okay, that's the same thing as dividing everything through by 6. So, we're going to write everything out. Rows 1 and 2 do not change. 1, negative 2, 14 augmented with negative 1. And then row 2 is still 0, 1, negative 5, 2. Now row 3 is 0, 0, 1/6 of 6 is 1, 1/6 of 6 is 1, right? This is now in row echelon form, and I'm going to have to come back in the next video and tell you how to tie it all up and solve for X and Y and Z in the next video, because I'm running out of room. It's 14 minutes and 53 seconds. Oh, okay.